Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 3 of McGill Cares webcast series, supporting family and informal caregivers. I'm Claire Webster, a former caregiver, certified dementia care consultant, and founder of McGill University's Dementia Education Program. I work with a dynamic team of leading healthcare professionals to oversee the program, who include Dr. José Moret from the Division of Geriatric Medicine and Dr. Serge Gauthier, Professor Emeritus, formerly of the McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging. McGill Cares is supported by the Amelia Saputo Community Outreach for Dementia Care. This is a very exciting day for McGill University, as it is the launch of the 2022 Alzheimer's Disease International World Report on Post-Diagnosis Support for Dementia, Principles of Care, for which myself, Dr. Serge Gauthier, Dr. José Moret, and Dr. Pedro Rosanetto are the lead authors, and for which we have gathered over 120 essays from some of the leading healthcare experts from around the world, including testimonials from persons living with dementia, as well as family carers. Today is also World Alzheimer Month, and to celebrate this momentous day and launch, my guest is Dale Goldhawk, Chair of Alzheimer's Disease International. Mr. Goldhawk is also a well-known Canadian journalist, author, and broadcaster with more than 48 years of experience in newspapers, radio, and television, and well known for Goldhawk Fights Back and Goldhawk Live. Mr. Goldhawk has been chair of Alzheimer's Disease International since 2021, after serving as vice chair for 6 years and a general member since 2006. He is past president of the Alzheimer Society of Canada and has received both the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal in recognition of his work with charities. Mr. Goldhawk is here to talk about his storied career as a broadcaster and what led him to become a passionate advocate in the field of dementia, as well as the role of Alzheimer's Disease International. Welcome to McGill Cares, Dale.
Thank you very much. Please call me Dale. It's Mr. Goldhawk stuff. I don't really know who you're talking.
Well, wow, what a privilege for me to be interviewing you. I mean, really, this is like, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So let's begin, because it really is. I mean, how do we go from being this really well-known journalist, broadcaster, to becoming the chair of Alzheimer's Disease International? Maybe we could begin by talking to me about your career as a journalist and where it all began.
Well, it began a long time ago, to be sure. I started out in newspapers, Toronto Daily newspaper, the Telegram, now gone, but it was a going concern back then. Moved generally to radio at a number of radio stations, then found my way into television, and suddenly it was 48 years later. I had worked most shows, done my own shows, done pretty well every single thing you can do in journalism, in broadcast or in print. And so after 48 years, I said, you know, that could be just about enough. So at 48 years, I started to concentrate more on my avocation, my other job, which is now chairman of the board of Alzheimer Disease International. And I got into that because my father had Alzheimer's disease back in the days when hardly anyone could pronounce it properly, much less know precisely what it was. And as we were going through the various stages, myself, my brothers and sisters, and my mom, I remember saying to Dad and to Mom at one point, you know, if I ever get a chance to make a difference or to do something about this terrible, terrible disease, I will do it. I promise you that now. And shortly after that, I found my way to the Alzheimer Society of Canada, and the rest is kind of history, really.
How old was your father when he was diagnosed?
He was diagnosed at 72. He died at 78.
Oh my goodness, it was actually very young, very close to the same age as my mom.
Yeah, yeah, relatively young. Yeah, yeah, that's true. But
Mhm.
those were a long 6 years in between where we gradually watched him decline. He had always been a very outward A-type personality, the life of every party, very witty, very well-read, very everything that way, bigger than life. And we just saw him kind of shrink into what he became near the end. I will remember many of those days till the day I die.
When I read a lot about what you were doing as a broadcaster, and you always seem to be an advocate. I mean, when you had Goldhawk fights back. And so I think like when you say that, you wanted to become passionate about this field and help, I mean, it seems as if even your career in journalism, you always wanted to advocate on behalf of others and other causes. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, yeah, I was kind of I guess, a bit of an unusual journalist. Most journalists are, very intent on getting all the facts of the story and really don't try to take a personal tilt in what's going on. I thought journalists could be much more than that, and that in some cases, with the right broadcast outlet, could actually be advocating for change, advocating for a better world, advocating for fair treatment of people. And of course, Alzheimer's disease and people living with Alzheimer's disease fits right into that. I didn't start my journalism career thinking that far ahead because, life happens. My father contracted Alzheimer's disease. One thing led to another, as I said earlier, and it just seemed very natural that I would spend as much time as I could away from my busy broadcast life working for Alzheimer's. In fact, in many of my shows, I would talk about Alzheimer issues quite a bit. My audience knew that I had this personal connection and readily accepted when I wasn't fighting back for somebody else. I was talking about Alzheimer's disease, and so they got very accustomed to that kind of thing.
Mhm. What was your experience as a family with the healthcare system? I mean, when at the moment of diagnosis, were you provided with any information about the illness? Were you provided with any information about how to best take care of your father?
Literally, no, not at that time. The family doctor, we went to a couple of specialists who confirmed as best they could back in those days that my dad did have Alzheimer's disease. But beyond that, really nothing. It really fits into the post-diagnostic theme that you have for today's World Alzheimer Report on World Alzheimer Day. Funny coincidence that, eh?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember what Kate Swaffer, a past board member from Australia, who's living with dementia herself, uh, how she described that situation. She got her diagnosis from a specialist, from a neurologist, and essentially was told, well, you better go home and get your affairs in order. Essentially, she took that to mean, okay, get your affairs in order, go home and die.
Hmm.
That was what was in her immediate future. She did not accept that. That's how she wound up on the board, working for others who were similarly affected by Alzheimer's disease.
Mm-hmm. So what year was your father diagnosed?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that. I'm just trying to go back. Actually have to look at the death certificate. It was 25 years ago. It's quite a while now. That's about when I started getting involved with
Right.
Alzheimer's disease myself shortly after his death.
The only reason I'm asking is that was 25 years ago. My mother was diagnosed in 2006, and here we are writing the 2022 World Report. And part of the World Report is that we conducted a survey, a global survey asking people what the biggest challenge was upon receiving a diagnosis. And the number one response that comes back was lack of information about the illness.
Yeah.
Right? So in all the 25 years, nothing has changed. And the first thing that happens for the majority of people when they do receive a diagnosis is the doctor prescribes some medication that may or may not work, right? But there is no information. And so could you imagine being at a doctor's office and getting a diagnosis of diabetes or heart issues or cancer and being told, like, good luck, see you in 6 months, like being given nothing? So, I mean, the basis of the report is the importance of better training and education for clinicians and healthcare professionals.
Well, and of course, you will remember that a number of years ago, ADI ran a massive public opinion survey that included clinicians, and they discovered that roughly 2/3 of the clinicians who took part in the study of some 75,000 samples, 2/3 of them thought that Alzheimer's disease was a normal part of aging.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, is definitely not true. That's what we thought 25 years ago. And the scientific medical world has moved on, but I'm afraid not all family practitioners are there as well. And that's certainly got to be a priority, that family practitioners have to be better equipped to understand and as best they can treat Alzheimer's, although there is no effective medication, nothing that really could be called a treatment. There are medications that buy some time. You know that. I know that many people know that, but they don't work for everybody, and they don't really buy you that much time in most cases. So we're still looking for those big answers,
So Dale, tell us, so Alzheimer's Disease International, for those people that are not aware, could you explain the role of the organization and how did you become chair of like the leading Alzheimer's Federation in the world? How did that come about?
Well, the ADI was formed about 35 years ago, okay? When 4 countries got together. They met in Belgium, because they felt that Alzheimer's disease is an equal opportunity disease, and that its effects are shown literally around the world. We should have some kind of world organization to deal with it on that kind of basis, because it's a major threat to healthcare funding, if for no other reason. So the 4 countries, the UK, Australia, the US and Canada, got together and formed the Alzheimer's Disease International Federation. And we started with 4 members. Now we have 120. So we're moving in the right direction. And our chief goal, our chief focus, one of them anyway, is to try and campaign and get more and more countries to develop a strategy for Alzheimer's and dementia, have at least some kind of program that has some meaningful funding behind it to lead to research, to better facilities, better care facilities for those living with the disease. And we got the World Health Organization involved in all of that as well, mainly through our constant prompting of them to take some definitive action on this. And they set a timetable for so many countries having a strategy in a relatively short period of time. And sad to say, we're way behind. Mm-hmm. We're at about 25, 26 countries that have a meaningful Alzheimer's strategy. And of course, there are many, many more countries now in the world. 120 of those member countries are our own members. And yet, the strategy has not been important enough to those national governments to drive home the fact that it is a specific disease, should not be lumped in with anything else, isn't an aging thing as much as it is a disease thing, and it's got to be dealt with in that way. And reasonable funding has to be given, reasonable priority by the governments to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. Hopefully someday an effective treatment. I mean, we say cure sometimes. I'm not sure cure would really necessarily fit the bill, because damage is being done to your neurons through plaque intervention and tangles intervention with beta plaque and tau tangles. So you can't go back necessarily, but at least you could stop the progress of the disease at a certain point. That would be, in my books, pretty darn good. It's that would be an effective treatment, and I guess at least a cure from then on. But it would not affect the damage that had already been done. But we're not even there yet, because we don't have any candidates for a meaningful drug right today.
So how is Canada doing with regards to the dementia strategy?
It has a dementia strategy. It had one a number of years ago when I was the chair. We went to the Senate hearings in Ottawa and testified several times about what we thought should be in an Alzheimer strategy. Our CEO at the point, Mimi Young, sat down and, with the help of us on the executive, the board executive, wrote a policy, sent it off to the Senate for them to look at, and it wound up being what the Senate gave to the government in terms of, this is what we want to see in strategy. So the strategy was announced. It's near the end of that particular stage now, and so we're campaigning for a new stage. There wasn't enough money, we didn't think at the time, but we'll always say that there wasn't enough money. But it's at least a start. We're moving down the line, and Canada has some of the, or you know this, some of the best researchers in the world, the best authorities in the world, including Serge Gauthier, who is, I've been interviewing Serge about Alzheimer issues, maybe 20 years, I'm not sure, quite a long time.
So tell me, like, you know, from everything that you're seeing, and I mean, obviously, because ADI involves so many countries from around the world, what are some of the biggest challenges that persons living with dementia and their carers are facing? I mean, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, like a lack of education and information from the healthcare, but what are some of the other challenges that you see that people are facing?
Well, it depends on what kind of country you're talking about, Claire. Certainly in the developed world, it's one set of issues involving, you know, perhaps working towards a strategy. In other countries in the developing world, it's quite a different matter, where stigma is still a very important factor in all of this, and basic funding, even to be able to afford a telephone so that people with the disease could call and get some information, or in many cases facing governments who really aren't that interested in talking about this kind of disease, because it affects, well, it affects old people, not necessarily everybody, across a broad section of the population. Although early onset Alzheimer's, as you know, can affect you even in your 50s. It still doesn't get the same kind of attention that childhood diseases get, and I guess for good reasons, but it just means we have to keep speaking more loudly and more loudly when we talk to governments who are in a position to change things.
So that was so last year, our team at McGill wrote the 2021 report on a journey through a diagnosis of dementia, and now so fortunate to launch the second report on post-diagnostic principles of care. And it's, you know, apparently this report is going to be seen by millions of people around the world. We have a link to it on our website, and also through this webcast, where anybody can download it and read it. So do governments take these reports seriously? I mean, are they really looked over by the policymakers and the governments?
Well, I think in the beginning, and we've had an annual World Alzheimer report every year for 35 years or so, quite a few of them. I think in the beginning they would look at it and toss it aside on their already piled high desk. Now, however, it's quite a different matter, and yes, they do look at them carefully. We find that the World Health Organization, in many of the research items that they get involved with, often quote something that's in a World Alzheimer report, and they are there as always available, online for free. We offer these things to anyone, as you know, and taken much more seriously, right down to our facts and figures about the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease around the world. The World Health Organization now routinely uses our numbers to explain all of that. So that's good as far as it goes, but we still need those national governments to move ahead and recognize that the growing numbers of their population suffer from dementia, most of it Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias, and something has to be done. In smaller countries, the prevalence of this kind of disease can bankrupt the healthcare system. It could bankrupt the healthcare system in a major country as well. It's a major factor that's really being not totally overlooked in every single case around the world, but not looked at hard enough, to be sure.
Well, I don't think ADI could have a better ambassador than you, Dale. I mean, boy, did they luck out when they got you as the ambassador for the organization. I mean, with all your experience and advocacy work, hopefully you'll be leading the helm for as long as possible for them.
Well, I'll do what I can, do what I can. I'm only, I have a wonderful board to work with from around the world, from a wide spectrum of countries. And together, we form the policy that the organization operates under through our amazing CEO, Paola Barbarino, whom you have met. And she is an absolute force of nature when it comes to speaking to governments and getting them to change their ways. I mean, there are so many so many draws on the health dollar that, we're kind of in line with a number of other diseases, but more and more governments, we hope, are getting to the idea that effectively dealing with dementia would do a great deal to help in the overall health and enjoyment of life of the Canadians, older people around the world.
Dale, one last question. So when you and I met in London this June at Alzheimer's Disease International's global conference, we were talking Alzheimer's, but then we just started talking, life's journeys, and you recently suffered a health scare. And then we both realized that what we had in common is we're both, I guess we're kind of like battery operated pacemaker buddies. So how are you doing? I mean, you're advocating for so many others. Do you want to just tell us a bit about how you're doing?
Well, it was funny when we discovered this. We discovered it because I mentioned it during the conference. I said, here's my example of a physical problem I had. Doctors looked at it and they fixed it. They took me into the shop, gave me a few new parts, and here I am, raring to go. At age 78, this happened to me. That's the age my father died at, 78, and there was no one who could help him. It was a downward, just by way of showing that not everything can be dealt with effectively by doctors. I had excuse me, I was going along, minding my own business, no particular health problems, hardly ever been in a hospital for anything. And at age 78, I went into the hospital with what seemed like a breathing problem. And I was on the phone to Jill, who was home, and I said, they're going to want me to stay overnight in emergency. And I said, I don't, I was complaining and whining about it. And Joe was saying, no, you got to be there. And that next morning, April 13th, my heart stopped beating. So if I had not been there in the hospital, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So I got a new aortic valve from a cow. And I got a couple of bypasses. And then on top of that, I got a pacemaker. And we're in the pacemaker club. You have one as well as I do. And we were finishing each other's sentences about light and the fact that we're kind of battery operated, I guess, aren't we? Yeah.
Yes, we are. And
you're dealing with yours okay?
I'm dealing with mine just fine. Have to go every 6 months to have it checked. And yes, it is. And I think it's just a testament to life. You and I had never met before. And, our both of us, the passion that we have for advocating for people with dementia and then just talking about our own health. And so life is a journey that we cannot take for granted. And it was just, I felt a privilege to meet you and have that connection with you.
Well, as well, I haven't talked to many people with pacemakers, I don't think, but I'm looking forward to the day. And my point in raising it at the conference was that I'm looking forward to the day where the treatment of dementia will be as routine as getting a pacemaker or getting your open heart surgery.
An annual, yes, whatever. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dale, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, especially again on the launch of the World Report. And really, your ADI, Alzheimer's Disease International, could not have a better ambassador to represent this topic, on a world scale. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, my distinct pleasure. Thank you very much, Claire. Mm-hmm. And congratulations on your work, may I say.
Oh, thank you.
Report.
Thank you.
Forward to reading every single word of it.
Thank you. So this webcast is an initiative of the McGill Dementia Education Program, which is supported by the Amelia Saputo Community Outreach for Dementia Care. If you would like to make a contribution to our program or for more information, please visit us at mcgill.ca/dementia. If you would like to join our mailing list to be notified of upcoming episodes of McGill Cares or regarding other important programs and resources, you can email us at dementia@mcgill.ca. Thank you for watching.